welcome to the channel. This is going to be my pop and drop build channel. So, let me tell you the story about my 07 Mazdaspeed 3. This car is garbage, let me tell you that. Like, I love this car, but it's given me so many problems, constantly under the hood trying to fix something. And then I gave up. I was like, you know what? I'm tired of going the cheap route. I'm going to fully rebuild this engine by a professional engine shop. We got this engine fully rebuilt. It has Manly Raj H-beam rods and Wiseco pistons, ARP main studs, ARP head studs. It's pretty built internally. Basically, the reason why I'm under the hood again is my pistons are pitted. They're not sealing correctly. Don't get me wrong, the car still runs and runs fine and can drive, but there's just no power at all. So I did a compression test. I got about low 100s across the board. They're like 10% difference between each cylinder. Did a leak down test, and cylinder 2, 3, 4 were leaking 40%, and I could hear the oil. I could hear air coming out of the oil cap, like a lot of air coming out of the oil cap. So that means your rings are not seating, your pistons are destroyed, something's wrong internally, and the engine's gonna lack a lot of power because there's no compression. How I'm gonna resolve this is, I'm tired of spending a lot of money. Right now I'm quarantining, I have nothing else to do. So what my plan is to drop the oil pan, take off the cylinder head, and inspect cylinder walls. If the cylinder walls are fine and there's no scoring, I'm going to take out the pistons and rods, hone out each cylinder, and then replace the pistons and just drop them in while the engine's still in the frame of the car. We're going to drop the oil in oil pan, look at the oil, analyze it, see if there's any metal shavings, try to look at the cylinder walls from underneath. Let's start off by draining the oil. This is the oil pan right here. That's the oil drain plug. Move that, drain the oil. And then there's all these 10 mil bolts. All these 10 mil bolts. I'm not sure how many there are, but they're all around the oil pan. I'm gonna remove that and then try to break the gasket seal, and then drop the oil pan. Don't forget the ones on the side of the timing cover on the bottom of the oil pan, the top of the oil pan. So 1 here, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so I got majority of the bolts out of the oil pan, so I'm just going to go over them and show you where these bolts came from. So these two are 12 mils. These are the only two 12 mils that are in the oil pan, and they are right beside where the dipstick comes into the oil pan. There's two sides. There's one shorter, and then there's one longer. The shorter one's on the left side of the dipstick and the longer one's on the right side. And then the rest are 10 mils. These ones just go around the oil pan. And then there's these two longer 10 mils that go upwards into the transmission and the oil pan, like right along there. And then these two bolts right here are what connect your oil pan to the transmission. They go into the side through those big holes right there. I spent like 20 minutes trying to pry off this oil pan, but I figured out that there's actually 4 transmission bolts. I only took out 2. So you can see there's those 2 that you can't really see the bolts unless you look on the other side of the transmission. And I've been trying to pry at it forever, and it wasn't coming out because I forgot those 2 bolts. Go. We've got 4 transmission bolts. So oil pan's out. Let's check it out. So on a stock Mazdaspeed 3 you won't have this. This I did a balance shaft delete. So with the balance shaft delete, it takes out this big heavy rotating piece that is connected to your crank and essentially balances your engine, makes less engine noise. It's honestly useless. It's added weight, like it weighs literally like 50 pounds. Oil baffle to prevent the oil from swishing side to side in the oil pan, and then there's this plug that goes in where the balance shaft delete plugged in, so you don't lose all your oil pressure, because it would be just squirting out if you just remove the balance shaft delete and didn't plug it. Alright, so this is underneath the engine. Under here, the oil pan's off, and that's our connecting rods and our crankshaft. All the stuff that makes the engine run. It's kind of tight underneath here. I don't have an engine hoist. I'm just jacked up right now. So, I'm gonna check the... I noticed that there's quite a bit of play and back and forth in my rods. Let's see. I don't know if you can hear that or see it. It's kind of hard. But yeah, there's some type of play side to side. That's okay. You don't really want up and down play, which I don't really have on any of the rods I already checked. All of them just have a little bit of side play. They move side to side. So to check if that's still in spec, which it should be, you need to grab some feeler gauge, and you need to search up your spec online. So my spec cannot exceed 0.045 millimeters. So I'm just going to start off with the 0.4 millimeter feeler gauge. And what you got to do is move the rod to one side and then put it between. And if it doesn't fit, which right now it's not really fitting, that means the gap is smaller. So for us, 0.4 was our maximum gap, and since it can't fit, that means we know we're still in spec. So I'm just going to do this for all rods and make sure that they're all in spec still. Alright, so I checked all rods. They're all in spec. The clearance does not exceed 0.3 actually for mine. So specification is 0.14 to 0.36 millimeters. That's the standard specification. Anything exceeding 0.045 or 0.45 millimeters, the clearance is too big. So now I'm kind of going to demonstrate what an engine shouldn't sound like, what I think it shouldn't sound like. So just listen. All I'm gonna do is crank it over with the ratchet. You hear the air? You hear the hissing? Oh yeah, you hear all that air. So I'm not too sure what compression stroke, what cylinder is on its compression stroke, but basically what you hear is the cylinders are building compression, and it's creating blow by. So that's why I'm losing my compression. It's all coming into the crankcase here, and it's either leaking through my piston rings or my piston's cracked. Not too sure exactly what it is, but we're getting compression is leaking into the crankcase. It's not my valves, because if it were my valves I would hear air coming out of my either my intake or my exhaust manifold, which I do not hear. All I hear is the air coming out from underneath. Okay, we're done with the bottom end for now. Took off the oil pan, inspected it, we didn't see much oil flakes. Connecting rod bearings look fine right now. Can't really see much underneath. Basically, the whole point was just to drain the oil. So now what we're gonna do is get rid of this battery, take out the intake, and work on removing the high pressure fuel pump. Alright, got the battery box out, got the top mounted intercooler off. Now I'm just going to remove the intake. Got an aftermarket corkscrew turbo inlet pipe right here, so that'll be looking different from a traditional stock one. And all it is just a little 10 mil or 8 mil screws on right there, and loosen that and this whole thing will pop right off. Intake is out. Yeah, making progress. What we did so far is remove battery, intake, coil packs we just did right now. Make sure you number them 1 to 4 wherever you pull them out. This is the front of the engine, that's where the timing is, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm just going to take off the valve cover, and for the valve cover it's like 12 I believe, 8mm bolts. Just follow it around, and don't forget there's also 2 in the middle. There's one there, don't forget. Or else you'll spend like 20 minutes like I did earlier trying to tear off a freaking cover when there's still bolts holding it to the block. Alright, valve cover is off. I think before I move to the high pressure fuel pump over there, I'm gonna remove the intake manifold. So intake manifold, pretty simple. All there is I think these are 10 mils. I don't know how many there is, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's one at the very bottom. I think there's like 6 or 7 10 mils. That's all you gotta do to undo them. But the only problem is to get to this, there's like a 10 mil right down there that you need to get to, and the only way that you can get to it is by sliding the power steering pump to the left. Loosen the top bolt and loosen, there's 2 top bolts. You gotta loosen this one over here, and then there's another one right over there you gotta loosen, and then crack the bottom one loose as well. And I mean actually remove these bolts completely out. And then once you crack the bottom one, it kind of like pivots, swivels, and then you swivel it, just clock it counterclockwise, and then it should give you enough access to that 10 mil right there to pull out the intake manifold. This bolt doesn't really come out because this is blocking it, but it comes out just enough that it disattaches from the block. And then there's like a bolt right underneath the pulley, close to over here. It's super hard to get to. That's what took the longest. You can maybe access it from underneath the car. Honestly, you just gotta play around with it. And then I didn't take out that bolt fully, I just cracked it loose. It just lets you pivot it back and forth like this, right? Just on that bolt. And now I can access that bolt right there to take off the intake manifold. So that's what I'm gonna do next. Alright guys, so I forgot to tell you, so finally got the intake manifold loose. It's just hanging in right here. You do have to take off the throttle body. It's right over here. It's pretty simple, easy to get to. All you gotta do is unclip a wire that goes into here, and I have an aftermarket corkscrew wired throttle body. So same as stock one, it has 4 bolts that go into it. Loosen those and it slides right off. But the thing with the stock one, I think I remember, is it has coolant lines to it. So you'll have to unhook those coolant lines and then quickly clamp them off so it doesn't leak coolant everywhere. But for the Cork Sport one, you do a coolant bypass and it just like reroutes itself back into the coolant system. Doesn't go through the throttle body. So I didn't have to deal with that mess. You'll also have to remove this EGR pipe. This EGR pipe was extremely difficult to loosen over here. It's like really hard for me to get to that, and like, not to get to it, but like just really, it's not easy to get off from this point. So what I did over here is there's only two 8mm bolts right over here to the EGR. It's pretty simple. Just undo those two 8mm and keep it attached to your intake manifold, and then maneuver your intake manifold out. Just slide it out. Don't forget your PCV. It plugs right in the back of your intake manifold. I was trying to yank it out for like maybe 10 minutes again, and I forgot that the PCV was clamped in onto the back of the intake manifold. Tomorrow, because right now I'm tired, been working on this car all day. Tomorrow my plan is to remove all of this junk right over here, mainly the high pressure fuel pump. Alright guys, so it's the next day. I did start on the high pressure fuel pump just a little bit. I haven't done really much to it. Just removed the wiring harnesses and the cords out of the way. So I'll go over that real quickly. So it's just that little bracket right there. It was bolted on by an 8mm right here and a little 8mm on the side here, and then there was another bracket right here that was bolted on the side of the high pressure fuel pump by two 10mm. Millimeters. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Don't forget, unplug this wiring harness, or this wire that goes on the top of the high pressure fuel pump, and then there's one down there that goes into the EGR type area right there. Unclip those. Wiring harness will be out of your way, and you'll be good to start removing the high pressure fuel pump. Steps on removing the high pressure fuel pump. You want to start off by removing these two clips right here. Recently started the vehicle. It'll be pressurized, and when you take this off, fuel will squirt out. So wear eye protection, be careful. 19mm bolt right here. I believe it's opposite of tightening, so I think you have to turn this counterclockwise. I'm not too sure to loosen it, but once it is loosened, be careful. It can slide all the way down to the bottom of the engine bay. So put like a stopper there, try to hold it in place. And then you have I believe 4 of these bolts, 1, 2, and then there's 2 more underneath. They're E8 reverse Torx sockets. Once you take out those, this thing will come sliding off of this. It'll slide right off. And then finally you have 10mm bolts. I'm pretty sure there's 5 or 4. There's 1, 2, 3. There's a few of those. Just look around, and once you got those off, this will slide out just like that. We got the high pressure fuel pump out. I guess some tips is what made it hard is it has kind of a, what is it called, a dowel kind of thing that goes into the high pressure fuel pump, and then there's that hose that goes right underneath there. You kind of have to use like a hammer, very lightly tap up on it so it comes loose from the high pressure fuel line, and then it comes out. Alright, so the high pressure fuel pump is out, and now you see why we need to remove it. Is because, first of all, to remove the head, you got to remove the cams to get to the head bolts. And you can't remove the cam if the fuel pump is still on. So, we had to remove that fuel pump, and now the cams are all free. So all we got to do now is remove the timing cover and all the pulleys on this side, and remove the chain, and then we can take off the cams, get to the head bolts, remove the head, and then we can inspect the engine.